Welcome back. Talking about the impact of online communities, I feel even the education industry today is witnessing a 360-degree makeover. The traditional modes of education are shifting from learning in colleges and universities to remote learning via dedicated online communities and platforms. And if I talk about the educators, they are struggling to create online education strategies, build communication, and provide support to students to keep them motivated. Online communities are the perfect medium to understand a student's approach and keep them engaged for unhindered learning. But what are some key metrics and strategies to make this learning experience wholesome and fulfilling? Let's know it all from the expert. Here's welcoming Scott K. Wilder, VP of Customer Partner Community Engagement at Base AI, to this virtual stage. The stage is all yours, Scott.
That's great. Thank you for having me today. I'm going to share my screen and jump right into things here. I know we have people from all over the country, so it's very exciting. Okay, so a little bit about me quickly. You got my title there, but actually my journey is probably more interesting. I was in the community space for a long time, going back to the AOL, Prodigy, and CompuServe days, and started Intuit's community, and then went to Marketo and started their community. But when I was at Marketo, I realized, and I think some people might be facing this out there, that community people do a lot more than just manage discussion threads. Like organizations tend to think sometimes of community as sad, siloed, an add-on, and just discussion threads. So when I was there, I realized that I wanted to elevate my game and give what I do more visibility. So there was a fork in the road. So I also doubled down in growth marketing. So a lot of what I'm going to share today are things that I've learned as a growth marketer and applied to my experience in communities. Just some background on Base, where I work. Think of us as a customer marketing advocacy platform, right? There's sales automation, marketing automation, and we do customer marketing automation, which basically community is part of that, right? Education is part of that. So we're really trying to figure out how to orchestrate and bring together all different kinds of interactions. Right now, there's major changes going on in organizations. And when I'm talking, a lot of this is from the B2B, SaaS, and mainly tech space, but I've also worked in the ed tech space for Coursera and Udacity. So in the past, right, community was sad. It was on the side, very siloed part of the organization. Now we're integrated. There wasn't a lot of integration in terms of technology, right? SSO, we had to struggle for federated search. Grzini's brought to the table Search Unify, so that's really helped a lot. So we have integrated experiences. And today I'm going to talk a lot about education and how it works community. And I think a lot of sites still today are taking a formal teaching approach to their online education, where one of the things I really believe in is practitioner-led, SME-led, and community-oriented learning. Something that was really successful at Coursera, at Udacity, is project-based learning and cohort learning. So all these changes are going on right now, and to implement them, it requires working with multiple audiences, multiple integrations, and multiple touch points. Because if we don't do that, this is what our customer looks like, right? They're getting bombarded from all different types of platforms, all different types of programs. We say we're customer first, we say we're customer led, but ask the customer, right? When I was at Intuit and Marketo, I used to bring customers into our staff meetings and I'd ask them. And one of the things they always said is, don't you guys talk to each other internally? You're all bombarding us. We see this also in our websites, right? If we look at the global navigation bar at all these top sites here, it looks more like an organization chart. It's interesting, learning and community, right? If you look at the SAP down there below, they're two different things, right? Customers don't necessarily think about them as two different things, right? If they're on a community, they want to learn from their peers. They want to learn in general. So we need to kind of change our mindset and think about how to create an integrated experience. What I'll call collaborative learning. I've seen it used called social learning. That's not the correct term. Collaborative learning is one place to start, where we're really combining multiple parts of the company, multiple disciplines, and presenting them in a unified, integrated way to customers. right? There's multiple touch points going on here. So I'm going to just talk about 3 today. I'm going to focus on education and community mainly, but I stuck advocacy in there. But there's obviously others. And what I really focused on in terms of my career is how to make them seamless, how to start with the customer first. So let's talk about different owned properties, right? On the education side, there's kind of a classroom setting. That's okay, but we need to think about like how classroom settings are changing over time. People prefer to learn in sound bites, bite size, spoon size, whatever you want to call it, smaller information. But classroom learning can still exist, especially from a cohort basis. In terms of weaving in community, study groups are really, really valuable, and also challenges. So you can actually weave these all together. Like a use case might be is giving somebody a challenge or an ask to sign up for a short course and then be part of a cohort and then be part of a study group. The previous slide talked about, properties that we own also, right? So we need to think beyond the properties that we own to non-owned properties. Whatever kind of community activities we do, whatever kind of education activities we do, we can also highlight them on these different outposts. Some companies are doing a really good job in terms of TikTok, right? We need to start thinking about that for many reasons. It's probably Google's biggest worry now in terms of search. More and more people are using TikTok for search. Discord is obviously popular with gamers and developers, but these are all different places where you can bring collaboration, collaborative learning, education, and community onto other platforms. How does advocacy play into this? Well, most of us are 1 or 2 people running community or education teams. So you can partner with your customers, partner with your community champions, folks like that, and have them represent you on these different outposts. They're not going to be selling for you. So I want to really make that clear, but they're basically going to help you identify other parts around the internet, other digital platforms where people want to learn about your products and services. To do that, when you're working with these folks, sometimes I call them the CIA, champions, influencers, and advocates, think about how to identify them. Now, some of them can be from your own company. Some of them might be external SMEs. Some of them might be practitioners. One of the things we're doing at BASE is really leaning into practitioner-led education, because those practitioners are involved in community, Slack channels, etc. It's also important to think about micro-learning. Micro-learning is really key. It's funny as I really focus on how to integrate education and community, done a lot of research. We're still thinking in terms of 45 minutes, 30 minutes, maybe an hour in terms of different sessions. We're thinking about 25 different lessons for one course. People aren't learning that way. You're seeing it you're seeing it on YouTube, you're seeing it on different channels. So we really need to think about micro learning. When I was at Google, we did a lot of experiments around how long will people take to learn something. 8 minutes or less, really. So that involved text-based learning, involved community interactions, involved YouTube type of videos, and also one-on-one sessions. I mean, even our podcasts are very long. And that's great if you're going to be walking around a lot or driving a lot, but not many people are driving a lot these days. I hope they're walking around and exercising. So, some of the things I'm talking about here is kind of reframing how we're handling learning, collaborative learning. You're integrating customers, you're integrating practitioners, people who are outside the company who have domain expertise. You're thinking about your own platform versus other platforms. And you're thinking about how you can do this in a very short time frame. Lots of different. I was reading today about micro-learning and the analogy. I don't know if I quite get the analogy, but they said you can't eat an elephant in one bite. It's got to be lots of little bites. So I don't recommend eating elephants, by the way. So think about micro-learning, spoonful learning, and how you approach that. So in terms of being practical and talking about how you're going to implement some of this in terms of how you integrate classroom and community groups. On the left-hand side here, you can see that there might be a class on customer advisory boards. When somebody's in the class or in the classroom or taking a lesson, something we did at HubSpot is we had links to study groups. Very powerful, very effective in terms of helping people learn together. And that's the key thing here. Is another thing to consider is starting these learning sessions, this collaborative learning in a group situation. Like you might actually want to start what you're seeing here, for example, is asynchronous learning, right? People are posting or reading. You might want to consider starting with a cohort in an actual live Zoom session, right? And keep those people together as long as possible. And on the right-hand side is what I call content merchandising. So what you're really doing there is when somebody's in a, say, study group or in a classroom, is highlight the other content you have. Again, we have such a siloed approach in terms of how we think about collaborative learning. We, again, I go back to the global header, the global nav bar on your websites, right? Why is resources like separate from community? Why is resources separate from education? Think about how to integrate those different experiences. Here is an example of you're inside the classroom, for example. Again, on the left-hand side, you're seeing the different lessons that people can take. Each one should be fairly short, as I mentioned earlier. But why not weave in those study groups and other ways for users to interact with each other during the experience? So what I tried to do is basically put together a 20-minute sprint on how we think here at BASE and how I think about community-powered learning or collaborative learning. So just to highlight and summarize, think of it as an integrated experience, right? You have all this different types of content. So you have educational content, you have resources and community. The name of my group or where I work now is called CARE. That's for community, advocacy, resources, and education, because we really want to make sure those are integrated. 2, think in minutes and not hours, right? Think about what you can accomplish from a learning perspective in 8 minutes. No long posts on the community, no long classes and courses. Next, think about videos and bullet points versus paragraphs and long lessons. Think about plan for owned and non-owned properties, right? Meet your audience where they are. It's great to do things in your own backyard and your platform, but think about where your audience might be. For example, we market to customer marketers or people who are doing customer marketing or automation. So where are those people hanging out today, whether it's in Slack channels or other parts of the internet? And think about how you can partner with practitioners and experts and SMEs, people who are outside the company. There is one school of thought that we need to create all the educational content ourselves. But the reality is there's people in the digital trenches who know a lot more than us. So think about how you can partner with them. So none of this is easy. It's hard to say. It's funny, I said you need a mind celt. I don't know what a mind celt is. But anyway, think about how you move from a transaction to a relationship approach. Think about how you integrate all these different areas. So that's it, a very short 20-minute sprint here. I want to allow time for questions. If you need to reach me, you can always find me on LinkedIn. So I'm reading the questions here. Micro learning. Wow, I'd be interested in hearing a list of micro learning alternative options from both you and Scott. Sana, do you want to go first or should I go?
You can go, Scott.
Yeah, in terms of alternative options, I think what we're seeing, if I understand the question correctly, is what we're seeing today is, in the last month or two, I've, written down kind of inventory of other online learning, and we still think about, many, many lessons and many hours it takes to learn something. And, what I know from Coursera and Udacity, that only 30% graduated from those programs. Now, that even required more skin in the game because people were paying for those courses. So, you can imagine the people for free doing these courses, and they don't have a lot of skin in the game. E-learning as a social science, I totally agree. And, it's funny, the e-learning term sometimes skews things towards education, but what I really wanted to talk about today was how user contribution systems or user-created content can be a really, really big part of that. Hey, John, how you doing? It's always good to see John out there. Other things here. Yeah, we're seeing a real trend, Sarah, a real trend going on here of people, integrating education and community. I've had a number of discussions with organizations that are, been reaching out to me or taking the initiative on their own about putting these two groups under the same person and thinking about how to integrate them. And, I think the big thing is the leaders need to be really open to it, and then also understand that there's other ways to learn as well beyond your education channel and your community channel. So really thinking about how you weave all that in, which is what I talked about earlier with resources. I mean, why are webinars out there in left field on your website when they should be integrated as well? I think probably should rethink kosher because not legit. Oh, good call there about the elephants. I know, it was really funny. That elephant analogy, I saw it this morning. I'll be posting something about it later on LinkedIn. Kimberly, thank you for your comment here. I'm scrolling up. Yeah, 360 Gurpret, I hope I pronounced your name right. Yeah, definitely a lot of changes are going on in organizations. And I only touched the tip of the iceberg. I only talked about organizations and then, some ways to think about content.
I think those are a set of great questions, Scott. And thank you so much for sharing such meaningful takeaways with us. I'm sure the viewers are now totally aware that online communities have made it easier for institutions to simplify learning and address the students' issues in real time, right? Thank you so much, Scott.
Thank you very much for having me. Really appreciate it. Vania, if you want to follow up with me at some point, I can answer your question. But great conference. Thank you. And
Thank
you
you.
can find me on LinkedIn. Have a great
Thank
day,
you.
everybody.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you. And that said, let's quickly join in our closing keynote. I will see you there.